I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened like a vice grip, and every sound in the room seemed magnified. The muffled cries, the frantic banging on the bedroom door, the sharp edge of panic in a man's voice I used to know better than my own. Then came the sirens. Louder, closer, cutting through the night like a cruel reminder that everything I thought I knew about my life was about to unravel in front of an entire neighborhood. Firefighters stormed in, their boots pounding against the hardwood like thunder. Neighbors gathered on the lawn, whispering, pointing, some covering their mouths in shock. And in the middle of it all, my husband Mark, tangled in the kind of disgrace that no apology could ever wash away. I stood there frozen, my nails digging into my palms so hard I could feel the sting of blood. I should have cried. I should have screamed. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep inside me, past the heartbreak, past the rage, there was a quiet satisfaction. He thought he was clever. He thought he could humiliate me in the shadows, behind closed doors. But now? Now the entire world would see who he really was. If you're listening to this right now, I need you to think about something. What would you have done if it were you? Would you have turned a blind eye to the betrayal, convinced yourself it was just a mistake? Would you have stayed, held on to the scraps of love, even as they cut you to pieces? Or would you have done what I did, planned a revenge so brutal, so humiliating, that it left scars deeper than any wound he had given me? Tell me in the comments, because trust me, you're going to have an opinion when you hear how it all unfolded. But let me take you back. Back to where it started, because nights like that don't happen out of nowhere. They're built piece by piece, lie by lie, until one day the truth bursts through the cracks like an explosion. My name is Rachel Miller. I was 32 years old when my world fell apart. And before you judge me, before you decide whether I went too far or not far enough, I need you to know one thing. I loved him. God help me, I loved him with every part of me. Mark Miller, my husband. My best friend. My everything. He was 35 then, a corporate sales manager with a smile that could light up a room and a confidence that made people believe him even when he was lying through his teeth. That's who he was. Charming, magnetic, the kind of man other women noticed when he walked into a room. And me? I was the quiet one, the steady one. A school counselor who spent her days trying to fix other people's broken lives, all while believing my own life was whole. People envied us. They'd stop me in the grocery store and say things like, "You and Mark are such a beautiful couple," or, "You're living the dream." And I believed it. I believed the dream, because when you're in love, you want to. You don't look for cracks in the foundation. You convince yourself the house you've built together is strong, unshakable. But foundations crumble in silence. They rot slowly beneath the surface, until one day the walls collapse around you. For me, the collapse started with something so small, so ordinary, that I almost missed it. It was a piece of paper. Just a piece of paper. I remember the day so vividly. It was late autumn in Denver, the kind of crisp day where the air smells like burning wood and fallen leaves. Mark had borrowed my car the night before, said his needed gas, and he was running late for a meeting. Nothing unusual. But the next morning, when I slid into the driver's seat, I noticed something peeking out from between the seats. It was a receipt. Folded, crumpled, almost invisible. I picked it up, thinking it was mine. But it wasn't. It was for an expensive bottle of wine and 2 entrees at a high-end steakhouse. The kind of place where the waiters wear black ties and the bill makes your stomach flip. At first, I smiled. Silly, isn't it? I actually smiled because I thought maybe, just maybe, he was planning a surprise dinner for us. I tucked it into my purse, my heart beating a little faster with anticipation. But then I saw it. A lipstick mark. Smudged, deep crimson, staining the corner of the paper like a signature. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. And for the first time, the perfect picture of my marriage began to blur. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the waitress had leaned over the bill. Maybe it was a mistake. I wanted to believe that. Desperately. But that night, when Mark came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his, when he kissed me goodnight with a distracted air, the seed of doubt took root. From that moment on, every little thing he did felt different. The late nights. The phone turned face down on the counter. The quick showers the second he got home. And then came the first lie I caught him in. Small, but sharp enough to cut through the veil of trust I'd wrapped around us. He told me he was at a client dinner, but I found a photo online, posted by someone else, showing him at a bar laughing, his arm slung casually around a woman I didn't recognize. I wish I could tell you I confronted him right then, demanded answers, packed my bags and left. But I didn't. Because when you love someone, really love them, you cling to the hope that you're wrong. You convince yourself it's not what it looks like. That was my flaw, my fatal flaw. I was too trusting, too forgiving. And he knew it. Mark gaslight me. He'd smile and shake his head when I asked questions. He'd tell me I was imagining things, that I was tired, that I was overthinking. He made me doubt my own mind, my own instincts. And here's the cruel part, it worked. For a while. But lies have a way of unraveling. Secrets have a way of clawing their way into the light. That lipstick-stained receipt was the beginning of the end. It was the first crack in the foundation of my so-called perfect marriage. And if I had known where that one slip of paper would eventually lead, if I had known it would end with sirens, with firefighters, with my husband exposed in the most humiliating way imaginable, I might have prepared myself. But nothing prepares you for betrayal. Nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the life you built, the love you nurtured, was nothing but a lie. So here I am, telling you my story. Piece by piece, lie by lie. Because I need you to understand how a woman like me, a woman who gave everything, could become the kind of woman who took everything back. Stay with me, because this is just the beginning. It started small. Almost too small to notice. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that my nerves were simply playing tricks on me. But deep down, something inside me shifted. Mark stopped coming home on time. The man who once rushed through traffic just to make it home for dinner suddenly had business meetings that stretched late into the night. He always had an excuse ready, perfectly polished, like he'd practiced them in the mirror before walking through the door. I remember the first night he came in past midnight. His tie loosened, shirt untucked, that faint smell of whiskey clinging to his breath. He kissed my forehead lightly, too lightly, and whispered, "Sorry, Ratch. The deal ran longer than expected." Then he slipped into bed as if it were nothing. But it was something. I knew it was. When I tried to talk about it, his response wasn't tenderness or understanding. It was sharpness. Defensiveness. He'd laugh under his breath, look me dead in the eyes, and say, "You're paranoid, Ratch. You've got to stop overthinking everything." Gaslighting. That's what it was. Though at the time, I couldn't quite name it. And then came the phone. The man who once left his phone lying around like it was just another household object now guarded it like a lifeline. Always on silent. Always face down. Always tucked into his pocket, even when he went to the bathroom. I tried to brush it off until one night my best friend Jessica came over for wine and an overdue girls' night. She saw the way I flinched when Mark's phone buzzed on the counter and he snatched it up faster than lightning. She raised her brows, sipped her glass and whispered, "Men don't hide their phones unless there's something to hide." Her words stuck to me like glue. That night, after Mark fell asleep, I lay in the dark staring at the faint glow of his phone screen. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would wake him. I knew it was wrong, but curiosity clawed at me until my hands shook. I reached out, slowly, carefully, and unlocked his phone. The truth hit me like ice water. There they were, a string of late-night texts with someone saved only as Client A. Messages dripping with intimacy, with innuendo, with promises of next time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My stomach knotted so tightly I thought I might be sick. And right there, holding that phone, I knew my life was about to unravel. If you've ever felt that gut-sinking moment, when the truth crashes into you like a freight train, you know exactly what I mean. And if you're still watching this, I need you to hit that like button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. I couldn't sleep after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, those messages replayed like a movie I couldn't escape. Client A. The audacity of it burned me alive. So I made a decision. The next evening, when Mark claimed he had another business dinner, I didn't stay home. I followed him. Denver's streets were alive that night, city lights reflecting against the damp pavement, but all I could focus on was the silver glow of his car as it cut through traffic. I trailed him carefully, my palms slick against the steering wheel. He pulled into a restaurant downtown, one of those cozy places tucked between art galleries and boutique wine shops. My heart thudded in my ears as I parked across the street, watching him step out, straightening his jacket like a man preparing for a date. And then I saw her. Melissa Carter, 27. His new co-worker. Younger, prettier, with long auburn hair that gleamed beneath the street lamps. She walked toward him, smiling in that way a woman smiles when she thinks she has stolen something that isn't hers. They kissed. Not on the cheek. Not a friendly brush of lips. A kiss meant to shatter me. I followed them inside, my breath shallow, my chest on fire. I didn't know what I was going to do, I just knew I had to see it with my own eyes. Fate played its cruel hand when I slipped into the women's restroom. Just as I was about to leave, the door creaked open, and Melissa walked in. She was on the phone. And that's when I heard it. Her laugh, her whisper, her words slicing me open. Don't worry, babe. The weekends are ours. He says he's careful. Oh, and about the baby. He says it changes everything. The baby. My knees nearly buckled. My vision blurred. She wasn't just his fling. She was pregnant. I gripped the edge of the sink, trembling, trying to stop myself from storming out and tearing her apart. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a living, breathing nightmare growing inside another woman's womb. I walked out of that restroom knowing two things: my marriage was a lie, and revenge would be my salvation. If you're still here, still watching this unfold, I need you to drop a comment right now. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Because trust me, you won't believe what I did next. The morning light streamed through the blinds, but it felt like a prison bar cutting across my skin. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the man beside me, his chest rising and falling, his face so calm, so unbothered, as if the world hadn't shifted beneath my feet. How could he sleep so peacefully while I lay awake drowning in the weight of his lies? I studied him, every angle of his face, the faint scar above his lip, the way his hair curled slightly at the temple. To any outsider, he would look like a devoted husband. To me now, he was a stranger wearing the mask of the man I once promised forever to. That night in the restaurant bathroom echoed like a haunting in my head. Melissa's voice, soft but smug, "I'll tell him this weekend. He deserves to know." Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed those words. They weren't talking about love. They were talking about a child. A future. A life that didn't include me. And yet, when Mark, yes, my Mark, opened his eyes that morning, he smiled at me with that same easy grin. Morning, beautiful. My stomach twisted. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I slipped into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and forced myself to act like the wife he thought I was. Because in that moment, I understood something. The woman who explodes with anger loses her power. But the woman who waits, who listens, who collects, she becomes the storm. So I tested him. That evening, while he sat at the table pretending to read an email, I leaned against the doorway and asked lightly, "How was your meeting last night?" He didn't even flinch. Exhausting. You wouldn't believe the back and forth. We're close to closing, though. Smooth. Too smooth. I tilted my head. That's funny. I thought I saw you downtown. Just for a flicker of a second, the mask slipped. A flash of panic in his eyes, a tightening of his jaw. Then the smile returned. Downtown? No, babe, must have been someone else. You know how many guys in this city wear the same suits. It was effortless, the way he lied. Effortless in a way that told me this wasn't his first time. That night, lying beside him, I felt like I was sleeping next to poison. The sheets were soft, the air conditioner hummed, but my body was stiff, my breath shallow. Every inhale felt like betrayal seeping into my lungs. The next day, I called Jessica, my best friend, my one constant. She didn't gasp when I told her. She didn't even act shocked. Instead, she sighed, like she'd been waiting for this call. "Ratch, listen to me," she said, her voice low and firm. "You don't just catch a rat. You make sure he never comes back." Her words clung to me like smoke. And suddenly, My role in this marriage shifted. I wasn't the wife anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the hunter. So I started watching him. When he claimed he had late-night calls, I noted the time. When he left for business dinners, I wrote down the locations. I memorized license plates, phone numbers, snippets of conversations. Every detail became a puzzle piece. And with each piece, I realized I wasn't living with a man. I was living with an actor. The hardest part was the silence. Pretending. Smiling when he cracked a joke, nodding when he rambled about work, letting him kiss my cheek while my stomach turned. But silence was my shield. Silence gave me time. One night, while he showered, I crept into the closet. His suits lined up like soldiers, polished shoes stacked neatly below. But tucked behind his shirts, hidden like contraband, was a cardboard box. My fingers shook as I pulled it out. The tape was still intact. The label read, "Couples Intimacy Kit, Discreet Shipping." My vision blurred. This wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. He hadn't just stolen our intimacy, he had packaged it, wrapped it up, and handed it to her. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the closet door, fighting the urge to scream. It was one thing to lie, to sneak around, to betray vows. But to plan a new life, a new intimacy, a new us with someone else, that was unforgivable. I carried the box to the bed and sat there, staring at it. The cardboard seemed to pulse in my hands, heavy with secrets. I imagined what was inside. Toys meant to create laughter, intimacy, passion. Things we had once shared. Things he now wanted to share with her. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The box itself was enough proof that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were right. Mark stirred in the shower. I shoved the box back into place, heart pounding, sweat beading at the back of my neck. That night, lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, he doesn't know it yet, but he's already lost me. And then another thought followed, sharper, colder, he doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to make him pay. Because revenge wasn't just an idea anymore. It was survival. I wasn't going to cry myself to sleep. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to be another woman swept aside for someone younger, prettier, shinier. No. I was going to remind him that when you betray a woman who gave you her all, you don't just lose her love. You wake her rage. And my rage had teeth. If you're still listening right now, ask yourself, what would you do if it were you? Would you confront him and risk being lied to again? Or would you wait and plan? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know, in my shoes, would you burn it all down or walk away quietly? I know what I chose. I chose fire. And as I drifted off that night, one image haunted me, that unopened box. A box that was meant to bring two people closer together. What he didn't realize was that very same box was going to tear him apart. The unopened box in Mark's closet wouldn't leave my mind. It sat there like a secret heartbeat, thumping behind every conversation, every fake smile, every empty "I love you." By day, I wore my mask. Smiling at co-workers, nodding at students, sipping lattes with Jessica. By night, when Mark was snoring beside me, I lay awake with my phone dimly glowing, scrolling through article after article about cheating spouses and how women exposed them. Some stories were petty, spray painting cars, smashing phones, torching clothes. Others were brutal, social media exposés, confrontations at family events. But none of them felt like me. None of them cut deep enough. I didn't want to simply embarrass Mark. I wanted him to feel the weight of his betrayal in his bones. I wanted every glance in the mirror, every step into a room, every whisper of his name to remind him of the day he crossed me. So, I dug deeper. Forums, blogs, anonymous confessions. Places where betrayed women bled their stories in ink and pixels. That's where I found it. A thread about poetic revenge. Women didn't just talk about catching their husbands, they talked about making them choke on the very lies they told. And somewhere between the rage and the heartbreak, an idea began to flicker. The next evening, while Mark was in the shower, I finally opened the box. The cardboard tore easily, and inside, nestled in bubble wrap and tissue, were neatly packaged intimacy toys, lotions, and, my stomach turned, 3 bottles of sensual massage lube. one already missing from the box. I picked up the opened bottle. Clear. Innocent. So ordinary it was insulting. I held it in my hand, shaking with fury, before setting it down again. That's when it clicked. It wasn't enough to catch them. I had to trap them. The next day, while Mark claimed he had a conference call, I slipped out. I walked into a hardware store 2 neighborhoods over, hood pulled low, sunglasses on though it was cloudy. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" a clerk asked, cheerful. I forced a smile. "Yes. I need the strongest adhesive you've got. Industrial strength. Something permanent." He raised a brow but led me to the aisle. My fingers skimmed the shelves until they stopped on a small, unassuming bottle with a bright red warning label, Superbond adhesive. Instant seal. Lasting grip. I bought 2. Just in case. Driving home, the bag sat heavy in the passenger seat. My heart pounded against my ribs, not with guilt, but with anticipation. That night, while Mark worked late, I made my move. I slipped the adhesive into the bedroom closet, shut the door, and pulled out the opened bottle of lube. My hands were steady, steadier than I expected. I rinsed it in the sink, dried it carefully, and poured in the glue, drop by drop, until the bottle was heavy again. Then I sealed the cap. The sound of that click was deafening. I stared at the bottle for a long time, my reflection warped in the plastic. This wasn't just glue. This was justice. This was the consequence of every lie, every gaslight, every stolen night. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. A day later, fate handed me another gift. Mark was in the shower, and his phone lit up on the nightstand. "Melissa." I didn't hesitate. My fingers moved like they had a mind of their own. I opened the thread of messages, flirty, reckless, disgusting. And at the bottom, "Melissa, can't wait for our private night tomorrow. I got wine and candles. You bring the fun." My pulse quickened. I typed back, slowly, carefully, making sure to mimic his tone. "Me, as Mark can't wait to use the new stuff tonight." I hit send. Then I stared at the phone, my chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of time. When Mark came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, steam curling into the bedroom, I smiled at him like nothing was wrong. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, water dripping onto my cheek. If he noticed the tremor in my body, he didn't say. Inside, though, I was no longer trembling from fear. I was trembling with power. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one being played. I was holding the strings. And soon, very soon, I was going to watch my husband dangle. So tell me, if it were you, would you stop here? Would you confront him now, or would you let him walk straight into the trap? I'll admit, I already knew my answer. The game wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The hallway outside Melissa's apartment was silent, almost unnaturally so. I remember standing there with my hand against the cold wall, the dim yellow light above buzzing like a nervous tick in the air. I thought of how many nights Mark had probably walked down this same stretch of carpet, heart pounding, but not from guilt. No, his pulse would have raced with anticipation, while mine now thundered with rage. Melissa's door was at the very end of the corridor. It looked ordinary, white paint chipped at the bottom, a brass peephole gleaming faintly. But I knew what lay behind it, a second life. My husband's laughter. Their lies. Their betrayal wrapped up in soft sheets and whispered promises. I crouched by the fire extinguisher case, fingers brushing the cool metal until I felt the bump of the magnetic box. I pulled it free. My lips curled into something sharp. Melissa thought she was clever, hiding her spare key here. Mark thought he was clever, bragging once that she always kept him covered. They had no idea how their arrogance was my weapon now. The key slid into the lock with a faint click. My chest tightened. My brain screamed one last warning, "You cross this line, there's no going back." But the other voice inside me, the one they had awakened, was louder. "Turn it." I did. The door opened. Her apartment smelled of vanilla-scented candles, sickly sweet, as if she were trying to coat the air with innocence. But beneath it, I caught something sour. Cheap wine gone stale, the kind that clings to fabric and lingers in carpet fibers. The living room was arranged like a stage, pillows puffed, magazines angled neatly, a bottle of Merlot already uncorked on the counter. This wasn't just her home. This was their nest. Their love letter, signed with my husband's deceit. I closed the door behind me and slid my bag onto the floor, unzipping it slowly, carefully. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something darker. The first camera came out. Small. Sleek. A predator's I disguised as technology. I tucked it between books on her shelf. Melissa wouldn't notice. The spines were too perfectly lined already. The second camera, shaped like a phone charger, slid neatly into the socket near the bed. The third, a pinhole lens barely the size of a button, went above the dresser mirror. From there, it would capture the entire bed, every movement, every betrayal replayed in cruel detail. I stepped back, staring at the red winks of light. Tiny, unblinking witnesses. My witnesses. And then came the star of my trap. From my bag, I pulled the bottle. Ordinary, innocent, disguised to look like something intimate. But I knew better. I unscrewed the cap, inhaling the faint sharpness of chemicals that made my nose sting. A bottle of super-strength adhesive, thick and merciless, refilled into something far more humiliating. I turned it slowly in my hand, almost reverently, before setting it down on Melissa's nightstand. Candles surrounded it like an altar. I stepped back. The scene was perfect. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening, breathing. My own heartbeat sounded louder than the humming fridge in her kitchen. And then, footsteps. I froze. A laugh echoed faintly from down the hall. 2 sets of shoes. 2 voices. 1 male. 1 female. I darted into the closet, slipping inside, shutting the door to a crack. My heart thudded so violently I thought it might shake the walls. The lock rattled. The door swung open. Melissa's laugh spilled inside like poison. Took you long enough. I thought you ditched me. Mark's voice followed, smooth and smug, the same tone he used when closing business deals. Had to make sure the wife didn't suspect. You know how it is. My fingers curled into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. Through the thin sliver of the closet door, I watched them stumble in, lips crashing together, hands fumbling with buttons. He grinned at her the way he once grinned at me when we were still new, still pretending to be in love. Melissa kicked off her shoes, giggling, tugging him toward the bedroom. Whine later. I want you now. I wanted to burst out, to scream, to claw her face, to break him into pieces. But I didn't. Not yet. The stage wasn't ready. The play hadn't begun. They collapsed onto the bed, bodies entwined, oblivious to the red blinking eyes above them. The cameras recorded. The bottle waited. And I smiled in the darkness. Because they thought they were in control. But I had already written the ending. If you've ever been betrayed, you know the kind of fire that lights inside your chest. The one that keeps you awake at night, the one that makes you replay every lie. And if you're still watching right now, it means you feel that same burn I did, standing in that closet, watching my world fall apart. Don't just watch silently. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you would have done in that moment. Would you have stayed hidden like me? Or would you have exploded right then and there? I held my breath as Melissa lit the candles, one by one, the soft glow bouncing off the mirror. Their laughter filled the room, sickeningly sweet, as if my pain were the punchline of their private joke. Mark reached for the nightstand, fingers brushing dangerously close to the bottle. My pulse leapt. For a moment I thought it would all happen too soon, before the cameras could drink it in. But no, he passed it by, lips returning to Melissa's neck. They didn't notice me. They didn't notice the cameras. They didn't notice the weapon I had left gleaming in the candlelight. And as their laughter grew louder, careless, dripping with desire, I tightened my jaw, willing myself still. Because soon, very soon, the trap would spring shut. And their screams would be the music I had been waiting for. From my hiding place in that narrow closet, I could hear every breath, every rustle of fabric, every sound of betrayal echoing in my ears like a hammer against steel. My pulse wasn't steady anymore. It was ragged, violent, clawing its way through my chest. My palms were slick with sweat, and my whole body hummed with a dark anticipation. The cameras blinked red. Silent witnesses. My silent allies. Mark's laugh, God, that smug, boyish laugh I used to love, rumbled low in his throat as he pushed Melissa onto the bed. Her giggles followed, airy, high-pitched, dripping with infatuation. It was nauseating. Like listening to strangers play act at love while stomping on everything I had built. Wait, Melissa whispered, breathless. Let me grab it. Her hand reached toward the nightstand. My heart seized. The bottle gleamed in the candlelight, its smooth plastic exterior betraying nothing of the venom it carried. She passed it to him with a coy grin. Mark chuckled, unscrewing the cap. You're always prepared, huh? Prepared. The word nearly made me laugh aloud. Oh, if only he knew. From the sliver of light through the closet door, I could see their silhouettes move closer, tangled in sheets and shadows. I heard Melissa's moans, soft at first, rising with eagerness. I heard Mark grunt, a man too sure of his own invincibility, too arrogant to imagine the ground about to crumble beneath him. And then, a pause. A silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. Mark's breath hitched, sharp and confused. What the? Melissa gasped, a shriek ripping out of her throat. Mark! Oh my God, what's happening? The bed creaked violently, the sheets rustled in frantic chaos. It's not, his voice cracked, strained with panic. It's not coming off. Melissa screamed, high and piercing, her voice splintering the fragile silence of the room. Oh my God, Mark, we're stuck. We're actually stuck. I pressed my hand against my mouth, choking back the laugh clawing up my throat. My whole body trembled, not with fear anymore, but with vindication. The trap had sprung. I leaned closer, peering through the crack. Melissa's face was twisted in horror, tears already spilling down her cheeks as she clawed at him, at herself, desperate to break free. Her nails left red streaks across his skin. Mark roared in pain, his face flushed, veins bulging at his temples as he tugged uselessly, his body jerking in humiliating spasms. Pull harder. Melissa sobbed. Do something. I am doing something. He bellowed, sweat dripping down his forehead. It won't. Oh God, it won't. They thrashed like trapped animals, every movement only deepening their misery. I could hear the adhesive tearing at their skin, raw and merciless. Their perfect little fantasy shattered in real time. I wanted to step out right then, stand before them, arms crossed and whisper, smile, you're on camera. But no. This wasn't the moment. The humiliation wasn't complete yet. They had further to fall. Melissa's sobs turned desperate, shrill. We need help. Mark, we have to call someone. His pride flared hot, even through the agony. No. No one can find out about this, do you hear me? No one. But panic was winning. It was written all over his contorted face. He groaned, teeth clenched, as if brute force alone could undo what had been meticulously planned. Melissa shoved him, trembling, hysterical. I don't care about your stupid pride. Call 911. Call them now. I felt my lips curve into a smile. Yes, I thought. Call them. Let the world see you for what you really are. Mark's hands shook as he grabbed his phone from the nightstand. His voice cracked when he spoke, the arrogance stripped bare, leaving only raw desperation. 911, please God, you have to help us. The dispatcher's voice, calm and detached, floated faintly from the phone's speaker. Sir, what is your emergency? Melissa cried into the receiver, her words tumbling over themselves. We're stuck. We can't move. Oh my God, it hurts. A long pause. And then, the words that sealed their humiliation. We'll send firefighters. Firefighters. I closed my eyes, savoring the sound, letting it wash over me like a symphony composed just for my vengeance. Because soon, the neighbors would know. Strangers would know. The entire world outside this candlelit cage of betrayal would come rushing in. And when the door broke open, when uniforms stormed inside, Mark and Melissa wouldn't just be cheaters. They'd be a public spectacle. And I would be right here, watching it all unfold. The wail of sirens cut through the night like a jagged blade, slicing the stillness of the apartment complex. I pressed myself tighter against the closet wall, my chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. Every nerve in my body hummed as if electricity were running through my veins. The sound grew louder, closer, until it rattled the very window glass. Then, silence. Tires screeched to a halt outside. Car doors slammed. Heavy boots pounded against pavement. Melissa whimpered from the bed, her voice hoarse and broken. "Mark, they're here." Mark groaned, his face a mask of agony and humiliation. Sweat poured down his temples, his hands trembling as he tried, once again, to free himself. The sheets beneath them were crumpled, damp with tears, sweat, and shame. And then came the knock. A sharp, commanding rhythm against the front door. "Denver Fire Department. Open up." Melissa sobbed louder, thrashing against him. "Oh God, I can't. Mark, I can't do this, please." He tried to snarl, tried to muster some remnant of his usual dominance, but his voice cracked like cheap glass. "Don't you dare say a word. Don't you?" The door shuddered under the force of another knock. "Fire department. If you don't open up, we'll have to force entry." Melissa shrieked, her voice a raw wail of desperation. "We're in here. We can't move. Please, please help us." And with that, the door burst open. The impact echoed through the apartment as firefighters stormed in, flashlights sweeping across the shadows. Their heavy boots stomped against the hardwood floor, the metallic clink of their gear filling the air. I held my breath as their beams landed on the bed. And then, silence. Pure, dumbfounded silence. "What the?" one of them muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. Two others exchanged glances, their brows furrowing as they took in the sight of Mark and Melissa, tangled in a grotesque knot of limbs and sweat, their faces contorted in agony. Melissa covered her face with both hands, sobbing hysterically. We can't get free. We're stuck." Mark's eyes darted wildly, like a cornered animal. "Don't just stand there. Do something." The firefighters hesitated, their expressions caught somewhere between horror and disbelief. One of them, a tall man with graying hair under his helmet, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, sir, what exactly happened here?" Melissa let out a scream so shrill it cut through the air. "It's glue. Something was in the bottle and now oh God. I knew it was time." I pushed the closet door open slowly, letting it creak, drawing their attention. Every head snapped toward me. The firefighters stiffened, their eyes narrowing as they took in my calm posture, my trembling hands that clutched the doorframe, the look of shock I carefully painted across my face. I let my voice break, soft and trembling. "Mark." His head whipped toward me, eyes widening in pure horror. "Rachel, no. No, what are you, how?" I stepped further into the room, my gaze sweeping from his flushed, panicked face to Melissa's tear-streaked one. I shook my head slowly, as though the betrayal had only just reached me in this moment. "I thought you were working late," I whispered. Melissa's sobs grew louder, a pitiful chorus of shame. Mark stammered, his voice strangled. "Rachel, it's not what it looks like." The firefighter nearest to me shifted awkwardly, his jaw tightening. "Ma'am, are you his wife?" I swallowed hard, letting the silence hang heavy before I nodded. "Yes." My voice cracked, raw and deliberate. "I'm his wife." A ripple of whispers stirred in the hallway beyond the open door. I caught a glimpse of neighbors, faces half hidden behind doorframes, whispering urgently to each other. Phones glowed faintly in their hands. I knew what they were doing. Recording. Spreading. Amplifying. Perfect. Mark thrashed against Melissa, his voice rising. "Don't just stand there. Get us out." The firefighters approached, pulling on gloves, inspecting the mess. One of them leaned closer, his expression grim. He muttered low to his partner, but my ears caught it. "We'll have to cut them apart." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Melissa let out another piercing wail. Mark's face twisted, half in pain, half in rage. "No, you can't." But they ignored him. One firefighter turned toward me, his voice softer, sympathetic. "Ma'am, you may want to step outside for this. It's not going to be pretty." I met his gaze, tears shimmering in my eyes, though inside I was burning with triumph. No. I'm staying. Because I needed to see it. I needed to watch as every ounce of Mark's arrogance, every shred of his lies, was stripped away under the glare of flashlights and the judgment of strangers. And as the firefighters prepared their tools, as neighbors whispered louder and the weight of humiliation pressed down on my husband and his mistress, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. And it was only beginning. The wail of sirens cut through the night air like a blade. I stood in the dimly lit hallway outside Melissa's apartment, my back pressed to the wall, trying to appear as though I had just stumbled into this nightmare. The air buzzed with tension, neighbors peeking out from behind their doors like moths drawn to firelight. Whispers rose and fell like a tide, some scandalized, some gleeful, all hungry for gossip. The smell of cheap carpet cleaner mixed with the faint perfume that leaked under Melissa's door. My heart pounded, but not from fear. No, this was triumph taking shape. I had set the trap, and now the universe was about to play its part. The sirens grew louder, until suddenly they stopped, replaced by hurried boots pounding up the stairwell. The firefighters arrived in a blur of reflective jackets and heavy equipment, their radios crackling. Apartment 3B. One barked, scanning the hallway. Yes. Melissa's voice shrieked from inside, high-pitched, panicked. Help us. We can't. Just please hurry. The neighbors gasped. A woman across the hall clutched her robe tighter. An older man shook his head, muttering, Lord have mercy. The firefighters crowded at the door, pounding. This is fire rescue. Stand back. I hugged my arms around myself, forcing my face into the mask of a betrayed wife who had just pieced together the awful truth. My lips trembled. My eyes welled with carefully summoned tears. I whispered just loud enough for those around me to hear. My husband is in there. Gasps rippled through the crowd like electricity. Heads turned toward me. The neighbors' eyes widened, their curiosity morphing into shock and pity. My performance was flawless. One of the firefighters jimmied the lock, then kicked the door wide open. The smell of sweat, perfume, and something raw spilled into the hallway. We all leaned forward, craning to see the spectacle. And there it was. Mark and Melissa, my husband and his mistress, tangled together in a grotesque parody of intimacy, naked, sweaty, glued in a position so humiliating it could never be erased from memory. Melissa's face was streaked with tears, her hair matted. Mark's jaw was clenched, his muscles straining as he tried in vain to separate himself from her. The room fell into stunned silence. Then, a collective gasp. Oh my God, whispered a neighbor. Jesus Christ, muttered another. The firefighters froze for a moment, their professionalism cracking under the absurdity of the scene. One coughed to cover a laugh. Another shifted uncomfortably, trying not to stare. Melissa shrieked, Don't just stand there. Help us. Mark bellowed, red-faced with rage and humiliation, Get us apart. Now. The lead firefighter moved forward, adjusting his gloves. His voice was calm, steady, though I caught the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. We'll do our best. But you're stuck pretty tight. I stepped into the doorway, clutching my chest like the world had just ended. Mark. My voice cracked, dripping with pain. Oh my God. What is this? What are you doing? The neighbors all turned toward me again, wide-eyed. Some with pity, others with judgment. I could feel the gossip weaving itself into the walls, ready to spread through the building like wildfire. Mark's face twisted. He avoided my eyes, growling through gritted teeth, Rachel, this isn't what it looks like. The laughter that erupted from the neighbors was immediate and merciless. A young man in the back barked out, Not what it looks like. A woman covered her mouth, shaking with suppressed giggles. Melissa, still crying, shouted, Shut up. Just help us. The firefighter glanced at his partner, then leaned in closer, examining the glued-together mess. He lowered his voice, but in the silence, I heard it as clear as day. We'll have to cut them apart. The words dropped into the air like a stone into still water. I gasped, covering my mouth with trembling fingers. Cut them apart? I repeated, loud enough for everyone to hear. The hallway filled with murmurs, the scandal now elevated to legend. The firefighter straightened, his jaw tight. "Ma'am, this isn't something we can just pull apart. If we force it, we'll cause serious injury. We'll need tools." Melissa wailed, "Tools?" Mark roared, "No. Just figure something out." But the firefighters were already unloading their gear: bolt cutters, shears, industrial-strength scissors. The sound of metal clanging against the floor filled the apartment, adding a chilling rhythm to the scene. I stood back, watching the chaos unfold, my face a mask of heartbreak, my heart pounding with exhilaration. Every detail was perfect. The humiliation, the audience, the whispers, the uniforms. It was theater, and I was the director. A woman whispered behind me, "Poor Rachel, to see her husband like this." Another hissed, "Serves him right. Men like that." I bit my lip, nodding slightly, as if agreeing, as if broken. Inside, I was savoring every second. Mark's eyes finally found mine, desperate, pleading. "Rachel, please. Don't let them do this. Help me. I love you." The audacity nearly made me laugh aloud. But I didn't. I let the tears flow instead, shaking my head slowly. "Love me? You humiliate me like this? With her?" I gestured at Melissa, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. The neighbors ate it up, their eyes wide, their breaths held, like they were watching a live drama unfold on stage. The firefighter crouched, inspecting the glued skin with clinical detachment. "We'll have to cut carefully, inch by inch. It's going to hurt." Mark roared in frustration. Melissa begged for painkillers. And I stepped back into the hallway, letting the whispers wash over me, feeling their pity, their sympathy, their outrage, all of it feeding the fire I had started. This was just the beginning. Because once the firefighters did their job, once the cameras I planted revealed the truth to the world, Mark and Melissa's humiliation wouldn't end in that apartment. No. Their shame would spread, far beyond these walls. And I would be there, smiling through tears, the perfect wronged wife. The firefighter's voice broke through my thoughts. "We'll have to cut them apart." The words echoed, heavy, final. And I smiled, just faintly, knowing my revenge had only just begun. The moment the firefighters whispered those words, "We'll have to cut them apart," I knew that Mark's carefully built image of control, of dignity, of status, had shattered. And I wasn't the only one who knew. Because just outside the apartment door, the neighbors had stopped whispering. They had stopped peeking timidly. Now, phones were out. Red recording lights glowed like fireflies in the dark hallway. The scandal was no longer confined to walls and whispers. It was being captured, framed, and preserved. Forever. I let my eyes dart toward the crowd, pretending to be horrified. My hands shook as I whispered, "Oh God, no, not like this." But inside? Inside I felt something electric. Vindication. This was the exact kind of justice that burned its way into people's memories. Mark wanted to play the role of the successful businessman, the devoted husband, the charming neighbor. Tonight, he'd be remembered as something else entirely, a cautionary tale. The firefighters worked quickly, their heavy boots thudding against the floor, their gloves squeaking against the tools. Melissa screamed when the cold metal touched her skin. Mark cursed, his voice booming, "Don't you dare record this. Stop filming. Put those phones away." But his outrage only fueled the fire. The neighbors chuckled, not out of cruelty alone, but out of that strange hunger people have for spectacle. The sight of a man stripped of his pride, begging in vain, it was irresistible. "Hey, don't look at me," a neighbor muttered, holding up his phone, red recording light steady. "If it was me, he'd film too." Melissa sobbed, "Make them stop. Please make them stop." The firefighter working closest to them snapped, "Lady, maybe worry less about the phones and more about not moving while I cut." His tone was sharp, weary, professional, but the subtext was clear: you did this to yourself. From my place at the doorway, I pulled my phone out slowly, subtly. I angled it just right, catching not only the scene of them writhing in pain but also the crowd's collective gasp. I knew better than to zoom in too close. The wide shot told a stronger story: firefighters struggling, neighbors filming, and me, the devastated wife. I didn't need to say anything. My silence, my tears, my occasional gasp, all of it painted me as the innocent woman who had stumbled into her worst nightmare. And that was exactly what I wanted the world to see. It took nearly 30 minutes of grunting, cutting, and careful maneuvering before they decided to wheel them both out together. The glue had made separation impossible without risking permanent damage. Their bodies were still attached in the most humiliating way possible. So they covered them hastily with a thin blanket, barely draped across their tangled forms. But it was useless. Anyone with eyes could see what had happened. "Careful," one firefighter muttered, guiding the stretcher through the narrow doorframe. Melissa wailed louder as the cold hallway air hit her. Mark's face burned crimson, veins pulsing at his temples. He tried to cover his face with his hand, but even that gesture was trapped, limited. And then the hallway erupted. Phones were raised higher. Someone whispered, "This is going straight on TikTok." Another laughed, "Forget TikTok, this belongs on the evening news." The neighbors weren't just watching anymore. They were immortalizing. They were narrating. They were turning Mark and Melissa into a punchline in real time. I followed closely behind, clutching my chest, my breathing shaky. I whispered just loudly enough for the nearest neighbor to hear, "I thought he was working late. I thought he loved me." The woman's hand brushed my shoulder gently. "Oh honey, men like him never learn." Her sympathy was real. And it was mine. Every word she whispered would later circulate in hushed tones, always framing me as the tragic heroine in this sordid tale. Exactly as planned. By the time the firefighters reached the building's lobby, the scandal had reached a fever pitch. More neighbors had gathered downstairs, drawn by the sirens and commotion. The glass doors framed a scene straight out of a dark comedy, a man of status, a woman half his age, glued together and paraded in front of dozens of eyes. The paramedics waiting outside pushed their stretcher closer, flashing lights from the ambulance bouncing off the windows. But it wasn't just the emergency crew waiting. No, it was the cameras. Phones were already raised before the stretcher even cleared the door. Gasps. Laughter. Mockery. The sound of dozens of notifications pinging as videos were uploaded to group chats and gossip pages filled the air. "Is that Mr. Lawson? The guy from the bank?" One man muttered. "Oh my God, it is." Another woman gasped. "Didn't he just give a speech about integrity at the Chamber of Commerce dinner?" The laughter that followed was cruel, merciless. Mark's face twisted as he shouted, "Stop filming. Put those damn phones down." But the more he begged, the more they recorded. His shame was fuel. Their clicks, their views, their gossip, it was all currency. And Mark had just become the biggest scandal of the year. I held back, standing by the wall as they pushed him past me. Our eyes met briefly. His were wild, desperate, pleading. Mine were wet, trembling, full of devastation. I whispered, low enough for only him to hear, "You did this, Mark." He flinched, as though my words hurt more than the glue binding him to his mistress. By midnight, the videos had already spread. My phone buzzed relentlessly, neighborhood group chats, local Facebook gossip pages, even the community Instagram account that usually posted lost dogs and farmers market updates. But now, it was Mark and Melissa. Entangled. Exposed. The captions were ruthless. "This is why I don't trust business trips. Look at this clown. Cheaters really do get stuck in the end." Melissa from 3B? Wow. Didn't see that coming. The comments poured in. Laughing emojis. Shocked emojis. Bible verses about adultery. Everyone had an opinion. And I kept recording. When the paramedics wheeled Mark and Melissa into the ambulance, I caught the moment his blanket slipped, exposing far too much, forcing firefighters to scramble to cover him again. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. That clip alone was enough to guarantee viral spread. But I wasn't done. As I walked home, Jessica's name flashed across my screen. I answered, and her laughter spilled through the speaker. "Oh, Rachel," she said between gasps. "You couldn't have scripted it better. Half the city's seen him already. And the best part? They don't even know what's coming." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. Her voice dropped, conspiratorial. The footage you planted. Those cameras. You've got the whole thing, don't you? I smiled in the darkness, the night air cool against my flushed skin. Every second. Good, Jessica purred. Because a little neighborhood gossip is one thing. But when the world sees, when his colleagues, his clients, his boss see, that's the end of him. Hours later, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed again. A notification from a local gossip page. Jessica had posted the video anonymously. The caption read, "Corporate Romeo meets super glue." And the views? They were climbing. Fast. Morning came, but it felt nothing like morning. The sun had risen, sure, but in my chest there was only darkness, the kind of hollow ache that comes after the storm, when the chaos has passed but the damage remains. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. My phone had buzzed all night with messages, tags, links to videos of Mark and Melissa being wheeled out of that building. Some were blurry, some were crystal clear, some slowed down with captions and laughing emojis. The whole city was awake at our expense. At his expense. And while he sat humiliated in a hospital room, still glued to the consequences of his choices, I sat at my dining room table with a manila folder in front of me. Inside was everything I had collected over weeks, the texts, the receipts, the photos, the recordings. Evidence. Proof. The kind of proof that didn't just destroy a marriage, it annihilated it. That morning, I walked into the office of a divorce lawyer in downtown Denver. Her name was Caroline Brooks, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with the kind of no-nonsense tone that made you sit straighter in your chair. I slid the folder across her desk, my hands steady now, no longer trembling. She flipped through the contents, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "Well," she said, glancing at me over her glasses, "if you want it airtight, this is it. He doesn't stand a chance." For the first time in weeks, I felt the tiniest flicker of peace. Not joy, not relief, but certainty. I was taking my life back, piece by piece, one signature at a time. "File it," I whispered. "Today." Caroline nodded. "Consider it done." But the storm wasn't done with Mark. Not even close. By noon, the scandal had exploded beyond neighborhood gossip. News outlets picked it up, first local, then national. Headlines blared. Denver business executive caught in bizarre affair scandal. Corporate cheater glued in place. Firefighters rescue couple in embarrassing predicament. Everywhere I looked, his face was plastered, grainy screenshots of the videos circulating faster than wildfire. People weren't just laughing anymore, they were dissecting, commenting, judging. And then came the second blow, the one even I hadn't anticipated so soon. Mark's company, Lawson and Trent Financial, released a statement by evening. I saw it first on LinkedIn, then on every major business site. Effective immediately, Lawson and Trent Financial has terminated Mark Lawson for conduct unbecoming of his role, citing moral misconduct and violation of company ethics. I read it 3 times, my jaw slack. Fired. Just like that. The man who had once strutted into rooms bragging about his sales numbers, who measured his worth in dollar signs and status, was unemployed. I thought of him sitting in that hospital bed, glued to a woman half his age, his phone buzzing with messages he couldn't answer, his reputation crumbling in real time. And I laughed. Quietly, bitterly, but I laughed. "Poetic justice," Jessica said later that night over the phone, her voice thick with amusement. He spent years thinking he was untouchable, and look at him now, jobless, humiliated, and stuck to his own mistress. But the humiliation still wasn't done. A week later, Melissa's truth surfaced. The girl who had ruined my marriage, who had cried and screamed when the firefighters cut her free, who had thought she'd won by stealing my husband, she had been hiding something too. She was pregnant. The whispers started small, with screenshots of her private messages leaked into gossip groups. Then it grew, with a photo of her at a clinic, hand on her belly, shared like wildfire. And soon enough, it was public knowledge. Melissa Carter, 27, was carrying Mark Lawson's child. But Mark denied it. Loudly, furiously. "She's lying," he shouted when confronted outside his parents' house, cameras flashing. That baby's not mine. His denial only made things worse. Clips of his rage circulated with mocking captions. Man can't keep it together, literally or figuratively. Melissa, however, wasn't backing down. She doubled down. She went to her own lawyer. She called reporters. She swore she'd prove it in court. The night I read the headline, "Scandal Mistress to Sue Former Executive Mark Lawson for Paternity and Damages," I almost dropped my phone. The trap I had set, the glue I had swapped, had been the spark. But now the fire had spread beyond me. Beyond Melissa. Beyond the affair. It was consuming every part of Mark's life. His job. His reputation. His future. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Looking back, I sometimes wonder, if I had chosen forgiveness, would any of this have happened? If I had confronted him gently, if I had begged him to change, would he still be working in his corner office, smiling in his tailored suits? But then I remember the lipstick on that receipt. The late-night texts. The lies whispered with such confidence that I almost believed I was the crazy one. And I know the answer, yes. He would have done it again. And again. Until there was nothing left of me but ashes. Instead, I chose fire. And I watched him burn. But as Melissa's lawsuit loomed, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about my revenge anymore. This was about destruction. His destruction. And I was standing at the edge, watching the man I once loved fall into a pit so deep, I wondered if he'd ever crawl out again. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't care. Tell me something. If you were me, sitting there with divorce papers filed, watching the man who betrayed you lose his job and face a lawsuit from his pregnant mistress, would you feel guilty? Or would you feel what I felt, a cold, sharp sense of justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I know every one of you has an opinion. And don't forget, stories like this are just the beginning. If you want more twisted tales of betrayal and revenge, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because trust me, the night the firefighters came wasn't the end of this story. It was only the beginning of his downfall. And Melissa's threat to sue? That was just the next cut waiting to bleed him dry. In the weeks that followed, the noise around Mark's scandal roared like a storm, but inside my own life, a quieter transformation began. For the first time in years, I wasn't tiptoeing around someone else's moods, someone else's lies, someone else's betrayals. I started therapy. At first, it felt strange to sit in that quiet office, across from a woman who looked at me with steady, knowing eyes, waiting for me to speak. The first session, I could barely get words out. My voice cracked as I told her about the lipstick on the receipt, the nights alone staring at the clock, the glue, the firefighters, the lawsuit. It all sounded surreal, like a movie I had accidentally starred in. But then I kept talking. Week after week, I unraveled the knots that Mark had tied inside me. The therapist didn't judge, didn't interrupt, didn't make me feel small. She listened. She gave me tools, breathing exercises, journaling prompts, little ways to reclaim control of my own story. Slowly, I started to realize that the glue I had swapped in that bottle wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was me, choosing to live, choosing to rise. In my neighborhood, things shifted too. At first, I braced myself for whispers, for judgment, for sideways glances at the grocery store. But what I got was the opposite. "Rachel, you're stronger than I could ever be," one woman said, hugging me tightly in the coffee shop line. "You did what so many of us only dream of doing," another whispered, slipping me a smile in the church parking lot. It stunned me. People weren't pitying me. They were praising me. They saw me not as a victim, but as someone who refused to be broken. My story wasn't just gossip anymore, it was a rallying cry. A reminder that women didn't have to swallow betrayal quietly, that they could stand up, even if it meant standing alone. Jessica was my anchor through it all. Some nights, she'd come over with a bottle of wine and sit with me on the couch, both of us scrolling through comments online. Thousands of strangers, women I'd never met, men who admitted they had done similar things, young girls promising themselves they'd never accept lies, they all had something to say. And in their voices, I found healing. Because the truth was, betrayal had nearly broken me. It had shredded the version of myself that believed in fairy tales, that trusted blindly, that thought love was unshakable. But in the ashes of that trust, something new grew. Something fierce. Sometimes, I whispered one night as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, betrayal is the best gift life can give you. It forces you to rise. And rise, I did. I redecorated the house, not because I needed new paint or furniture, but because I needed to feel like it was mine. I hung new curtains, bought plants, filled the shelves with books I'd always wanted to read. Each change was small, but together they were powerful. I applied for a promotion at the school where I worked as a counselor. For years, I had hesitated, doubting myself, believing Mark when he implied I wasn't ambitious enough. But this time, I didn't hesitate. And when I got the position, I felt a pride I hadn't felt in years. Piece by piece, I was building a new life. A life without Mark. A life without lies. A life that was finally, unapologetically mine. Of course, Mark's collapse continued. Melissa's lawsuit dragged him deeper into the mud, and every time his name surfaced in the news, it was attached to words like scandal, affair, humiliation. But I no longer followed every update. Because his downfall wasn't my story anymore. My story was survival. Growth. Triumph. And as I sat on my porch one evening, the sun setting over Denver, the mountains painted gold in the distance, I realized something. I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was free. So now, I leave you with this thought, because maybe you've been where I was, staring at evidence you didn't want to believe, caught between heartbreak and rage. Maybe you've stayed silent when you should have spoken, or maybe you've dreamed of revenge but never acted. Tell me, would you have forgiven a man like Mark? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Taken back your power, no matter how messy, no matter how public, no matter how painful? Drop your answer in the comments below, because I want to hear your truth. And if you believe that betrayal doesn't have to break you, that it can be the spark that forces you to rise, make sure you subscribe, because there are more stories like mine, and you won't want to miss them. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't glue, or exposure, or even lawsuits. The greatest revenge is living a life so full of dignity, strength, and freedom, that betrayal becomes nothing more than the first chapter in your triumph.